Well, hello again, and thanks for making your way back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. Yes, thanks for coming back to Classic Dirt Bike TV as we head towards the end of 2024 and of course the finish of another classic and vintage year here on CDB TV. But before we go any further, I'd just like to say thanks to everybody out there who have taken the time to watch my video content this year, and especially to all the brand new subscribers who have signed up in the last 12 months. I think the current total of subscribers on my channel is heading towards the 19,600 total. So again, thanks to each and every one of you for your support during 2024. Right, we're going to take a quick break from our two-wheeled Scrambles machine to take a look at another quite nice trials bike that I came across back in 2020 at the Scottish Motorcycle Show. So let's dive straight into that video now and take a look at Kenny Harpers' lovely 1982 Fantic 200 trials machine.
Right, so as I said, just another short break from our usual two-wheeled scrambles or motocrossers that we normally feature here on my channel, so that we can take a gander at yet another two-wheeled balance bike, or trials bike as I believe these are called. And this fine example here is a 1982 Italian Fantic 200 two-stroker that I came across at the 2020 Scottish Motorcycle Show. And the bike at that time belonged to Scottish trials and scrambles rider Kenny Harper. Now, Fantic motorcycles, as you're probably aware, were founded by Mario Agrati and Henry Keppel Hesselink in Casia in Italy back in 1968, and they started off by manufacturing and exporting enduro motorbikes and mini bikes and other things like go-karts, and it was around the early 1970s when Fantic began building and selling bikes into the UK, when they at that time took advantage of the 16er laws, when at that time a 16-year-old wasn't allowed to ride many of the bigger 250 machines that were available, and Fantic filled that particular gap by building 50cc sports mopeds. And one of their most popular models, you may remember, was their Fantic Chopper 50cc moped of 1972, which was hugely popular with youngsters of that day. But in the following years, Fantic did go on to build a variety of 125 road and off-road bikes, and eventually they moved on to building small engined trials machines like our featured bike here, which is said to be a 200cc model from 1982. And it was around the 1980s when Fantic enjoyed much of their initial success in observed world trials events by winning 3 titles, as well as 7 wins at the famous Scottish 6 days trial. Although, as I've mentioned in some of my other videos before regarding these off-road trials bikes, now these lightweight machines are not really my usual area of expertise, but most of the information that I've gained about this featured bike was the stuff that I remember from filming it on the day, and the other information that I don't know was gained from various other contacts or sources, so don't take it as gospel that my ramblings about this bike are 100% correct, because as I've said before, trials bikes aren't my usual field of expertise, but nevertheless they're certainly dirt bikes after all, and we're still quite happy to feature them from time to time here on my channel. So let's begin by taking a look at our Fantic's chassis, which for 1982, as you can see, was a lightweight tubular steel item, which despite it being made from steel, it would still be a lot lighter than, say, a Scrambles or motocross equivalent bike, because overall weight, as you know, is a big factor on being able to chuck these trials bikes around and up and over obstacles. Although having said that, your modern day trials machines now are super strong and super light with their featherlight alloy chassis and their other trick exotic bolt-ons, but nevertheless, even for 1982, I expect that this Fantic's frame and its design will still make it a reasonably lightweight and competitive trials machine, with its reputed overall weight, which according to my research was said to be around the £190 bracket. And whether that figure is good for a 1980s trialer, I don't actually know, although I'm sure that all of you trials experts that are watching this video will certainly have a better idea if that particular figure is good or maybe not so good for a bike of this size. And again, for 1982, you can see that the bike's rear swing arm is also made of small bore tubular steel, which again isn't in the same league of maybe an equivalent motocross swing arm of the same cc, but it was still very strong and of course made of steel, whereas like the chassis in modern times would probably now be made of nice shiny lighter alloy. But nevertheless, these were the construction materials of their time, and they were still light enough to keep the overall weight of this trials machine to a decent working weight. Now, I'm not suggesting that every single component here on Kenny's Fantic is as it was from 1982, and these Apico footrests are certainly upgrades to what would have been probably a pair of skinny items for that year. And because the biggest percent of the rider's time is found standing up on the pegs on these trials machines, it makes sense to have a decent pair of strong, wide footrests that you can give the rider more support for his feet. And these superbly made alloy Apico parts will without doubt be a massive improvement to the steel originals, and it'll also help the overall weight of the motorcycle shed some precious grams as well. So this is a decent upgrade to the original Fantic factory parts. But as we move on to the engine on our Fantic, which I was told was a 200, but when you check out this clutch cover, it certainly suggests to me to be an FM 350 or Fantic motor 350 cover. And if you also take a look at the rear of the engine casing here at the gearbox, it also claims to be a Fantic 350. So whether all of these parts, like that clutch cover and this engine casing, are maybe all interchangeable across the Fantic range, I don't actually know, but I do suspect that all of you Fantic and trials experts out there will know exactly what's going on. But there is another well documented scenario to consider here, that although this bike is labelled as a 200. Its actual cubic capacity is said to only be 156 cc. So whether the 200 is some kind of model number and it's actually only 156, it's all certainly a bit confusing, which doesn't help at all when we're trying to clear up the mystery of the 350s that are stamped on the engine. But to avoid any further head scratching, I'm just going to call this engine a 200, just to keep things nice and simple and to stop me losing sleep over whether it could be a 200, a 156 or even a 350. Anyhow, from what I've researched and been given verbally by some of the owners who have ridden these Fantics, this piston port two-stroke power plant was apparently quite a decent engine and well suited for these kind of observed trials bikes, and it's said to have had a 6-speed gearbox and the usual wet oil-cooled clutch as well. Now, I also found out that in 1982 our Fantic power plant would have left the factory with an Italian Dell'Orto carburetor to supply its fuel and air into that engine, but our machine here, as you can see, is fitted with a 26mm Oco carb that's been made where all of the other high quality parts come from, Taiwan. So enough said, but that carb's air supply was also drawn through a foam filter that was inside this black alloy airbox, and it was a simple rubber hose that connected both the carburetor and the airbox together. And as we move on to the Sparks side of our Fantic Trials engine, and underneath this combined ignition and primary drive sprocket cover, it was a good quality Bosch CDI ignition system that was used to supply the spark to get our two-stroke engine up and running. And this cover, as you can see, was made of plastic, more than likely because it would have been cheaper than alloy, a bit more durable as well, and of course much more lighter than either cast alloy or a steel equivalent item. But this small Fantic engine did have quite a sizable cylinder on the outside with these big massive cooling fins, which were more than likely made at this size just to try and help dissipate all the heat from the engine more efficiently. And if you look at the back of the cylinder, you can also see it was fitted with those rubber blocks in between the fins, which was supposed to try and cut down on the vibration that was created when the engine was running, and therefore also cut down on the ring-a-ding-ding that you used to get from these smaller two-stroke power plants. Although, mind you, whether these rubber insulation blocks actually did make any kind of improvement to fin vibration, I'm not entirely sure. But you can see that the Fantic's exhaust appears to be the original pipe from 1982, although on closer inspection here it's definitely stamped for a Fantic motor 250, which again adds even more controversy to the debate about what size of engine we're actually dealing with here, because its official title, as I said, is a Fantic 200, when its designated CC is said to be 156, and the engine has that Fantic motor 350 stamped in it, and now we've got an exhaust that's clearly for a 250 model. So exactly what's going on with this little trials bike, I don't actually know, but this up and over exhaust pipe still looks in pretty good nick for a 42-year-old trials bike. And again, here at the back end, I'm assuming that this mild steel tailpipe is the proper part for a 1982 trialer, which when you actually look at it, it certainly has the look of being quite a heavy lump. But once more, this was still the early 1980s, and some of the European trials bikes at that time were still using parts like this on their off-roaders. But it was just two simple holes here at the back to let loose those exhaust gases and to keep that bark from the Fantic engine to a minimum. And I can imagine with just these two small jets at the back, the engine must have been choking in its own gases when it was running. But I suppose the upside would probably mean that this bike was super quiet as well. Right, so moving on to the front end of our little Italian pony. And I have to be truthful here, I don't actually have a clue as to what make or model of front forks we've got here on our Fantic, but I do know that many of these bikes did use Italian Marzoccis as their front suspension systems. And now that I do have a look at these forks, I think these could indeed be those same items. And if they're not, my guess is that they'll more than likely be some kind of Italian forks, like maybe even a pair of Serianis or something along those lines. But either way, I'm reasonably confident that they'll be at least Serianis or Marzoccis, mainly because those two manufacturers were among two of the most popular brands of forks that were bolted onto Italian off-roaders in that early 1980s period. But these forks for the 1980s were still pretty basic in their construction and operation, but still perfectly suited for this kind of lightweight off-road dirt bike. And staying here at the front end of the bike with the hubs and the brakes, which you can see were much smaller items than you'd normally find on an equivalent motocross or scrambles bike of the same size. But again, these old school drum brakes didn't have to be too big and powerful, because speed was never really an issue on these trials machines, and weight-wise they were certainly a lot lighter than its scrambles equivalent. So these smaller hubs and drum and shoe stopping systems worked perfectly well on our featherweight Fantic. And of course it was much the same here at the back of our FM 200 with a lightweight alloy hub and your stock standard drum and brake shoe setup. But when you compare the overall diameter of this rear brake to one that you'd find on an equivalent sized 250 motocrosser, then you can see just how much smaller this rear brake is in comparison. And as I said, it was still small enough and powerful enough to lock up this rear wheel whenever it was required. And again, while we're here at the wheels part of our trials bike, I'm quite sure that these gold alloy anodized wheels are brand new replacements on this bike, because back in 1982 these wheels would have probably been just simple polished alloy rims, although I have to say that these gold wheels that Kenny's fitted to this bike does give it a quite nice glow, and it just seems to fit in perfectly with the rest of the red frame and the other bits that are bolted onto the bike. And I expect also that these new rims will have been completely relaced with brand new spokes as well. But with regards the rear suspension on our Fantic Trials bike, back in '82 it would have been all manner of rear shocks that would have been fixed onto our bike in that year, and again those would have probably been Italian units like possibly Marzocchi's, or even Spanish beater shocks have been known to have been fitted to these Fantics in that year. But certainly while Kenny's trials bike was sitting here on display at the Scottish Motorcycle Show, you can see that he's now fitted a quite good pair of good quality Falcon trial shocks, which are of course made right here in the UK, and I can certainly endorse these Falcon units because I did have a similar pair that was fitted onto my old 1980 440 Michael Twinshocker that I raced back in the day, which of course naturally were a motocross version of these trials shocks, but I always found them to be very well made and worked well, and were certainly less expensive than some of the other top brands of that time. But when it comes to the bodywork on these trials bikes, as you'd expect, everything has to be kept low key and to the bare minimum to try and keep the bike as light as possible. And underneath this combined fuel tank cover and seat, there was a simple plastic fuel cell that I think held just around that 1 gallon of pre-mixed oil and petrol. Now, I'm pretty sure that this cover here is also made from fiberglass, although by 1982 most off-road bike manufacturers by then had moved away from the much more brittle fiberglass panels that these bikes used for their bodywork and fuel tanks. But you can certainly see that this part of the bike was super slim as well, which is the standard on even modern trials bikes today. But our bike's fuel cell certainly held more than enough gas to keep that Fantic two-stroke engine running on even the trickiest of trials stages. So making our way along the bike's bodywork. Now usually every other kind of motorcycle is fitted with some kind of seat to enable the rider to operate it, but as you know, these trials bikes are all about weight and balance, and almost 100% of the time the riders are standing up on the pegs to negotiate obstacles or other tricky hurdles that are in its way. So basically a seat is really a non-event on a trials motorcycle, and this sticker, as I can only describe it, on the bodywork is a little reminder that if you were ever even thinking of putting your backside down for a second, then this area here is usually where it would go, and it would probably be best advised not to subject your body to this imitation of a seat if you've maybe got a bad back or some other ailing skeletal problems. And in fact, I can hear my own back starting to creak already at the very thought of even thinking of sitting down on this small rubber stamp. But nevertheless, as we move up to the business end of our Italian Fantic motor, we've got a pair of relatively modern style rental handlebars with its usual crossbar pad on there as well. Now, all of the control cables as far as I know, are brand new replacements to the 1982 factory cables, and the clutch and the front brake levers are period correct Magura items with their rubber lever covers there as well. But probably the 1982 handlebars would have had a much different profile to these rental items, but then again, this part of the bike is usually all down to the rider's own height and stature, and just exactly how he stands on the bike. So you'd probably see a wide variety of different handlebar configurations to suit all different preferences of rider. But some of the other controls that are screwed onto these rental bars is this Italian manufactured Domino throttle gasser, which, as I recall, used to be known as Tomaselli, who made all manner of high-quality motorbike components like throttle tubes and grips and cables and levers and many other small motorcycle-related parts. But these Domino controls are still being made in Italy by Domino, and as I said, they do supply these kind of smaller parts to bike manufacturers all across the globe. Anyhow, to conclude our walk around the various parts on our trials machine, now both this front and the bike's rear mudguard are reproduction universal Gonelli plastic items, and it's quite well documented that Gonelli do supply mudguards of every shape, colour and design for more or less every single trials bike on the planet. And although these are Spanish made, they're usually quite decent quality and easily available if you need to get some brighter new plastic mudders to brighten up your trials ride. Anyhow, summing up here, I'm not suggesting for a single minute that Kenny's Fantic trials bike is a 100% bona fide 1982 original, because I do know that it isn't, because it does have things like different wheels and a few other non-factory parts fitted onto it. Although despite that, it's still a little cracking Italian stallion, and another great piece of trials history from the 1980s, when of course these steel chassis bikes were in use prior to them becoming super light when alloy chassis were then taking over. Although I have to say it's still a nice change to feature these different kind of examples of classic off-roaders from time to time, because trials riding is every bit as big as vintage scrambles or motocross, and some people would even argue that it's even more popular than scrambling. But nevertheless, trials riding is still a discipline of control, balance and riding skill. So although it may not be about outright speed and throwing up those big rooster tails from that back wheel, you still can't help but admire what these guys can do on these two-wheeled trials bikes. Now, I don't have much in the way of trials footage to let you have a look at, but what I do have is this short clip that I filmed at the Classic Motocross the Nations event that was held at Ballyblack in Northern Ireland back in 2016. But this guy here is multiple Irish trials champion Andrew Perry, who I'm told is 6 times Irish trials champion and 11 times Ulster champion. And Andrew was doing a short demonstration here on the Friday evening prior to the MXDN Scramble the next morning. Now, of course, Andrew's not using a classic trials bike like our featured Fantic. Andrew's riding a state-of-the-art alloy framed Montesa Cota 300 RR special edition. Well, it was special in 2016, I suppose. So let's just take a look at some of Andrew's skills.
We'll be looking for people to try this out. Leonard? I'm not seriously very serious there for a second. Riding up over the top of some of the equipment that was set out before us here. As you can see, we've had to point it all down the hill because if we head across at the angle, the equipment wants to fall over. None of it's fastened to the ground. It's all just sitting there. And that kind of adds to the fun of it all in a roundabout sort of a way.
Certainly those who are watching on the area there, and some of it's a little bit shaky enough, but here we go.
So we'll pick it up on what we call the big rig, the Russell's Motorcycles rig. Russell's Motorcycles very kindly supply the bikes, courtesy of Honda UK. And here we go. Up on to the very top, stop the bike, spin it around, get it balanced once again. You going to stop me, big man? He's strong enough to stop me. I'm happy enough that he's going to do that, because I don't think if I stop.
Good job with that.
Thanks, Sammy. So what we're going to do, we're going to pick the front wheel up in the mid-air, drop down off the side, and hopefully stop before he has to catch me. Hopefully. Yep. And back onto the ground again.
What about a wee round of applause just to give him a bit of encouragement to get that on the road?
The rig sits 8 feet high, and now we've got it lined up. Well, we can go up, none of them come back down. But this way we've got it the other way around. We're going to go back up again, 2 feet vertical at the top of the ramp, and right up onto the top. Up on, hop the bike around. You can see the whole lot wobbling around here. And once again, back onto the ground.
Now that makes it look so very easy.
So next up, we've got the van. As you can see, a bit of a ramp at the front of the van. Going to jump onto the roof, onto the rig, and back out off the far side. This is where you'll really see it. This whole thing is just sitting here. It's not over. So, if I put the feet down, don't laugh too hard. The whole aim of the game is keeping our feet up. Here we go. Just clearing the roof. You see the van wobbling around here. You might even notice my backside wobbling around, but here we go. Going to turn the bike. Right. Nice and steady. And we're going to take it out onto the rig next. Here we go. And once again, line it up. As you can see, the whole lot wobbling around. Need to try and allow for that. Back wheel over. Got the front wheel stuck. Here we go. Now, I'm going to have to take the bike backwards a bit. Front wheel up onto the top, and wheelie off the far side. Right. Here we go. Front wheel up. Back wheel to the point where it's going to bite. Just about there. Pick the front wheel up, and hopefully all in one go, right up over the top. Onto the back bit. And I can feel it is jammed. It's jammed by the foot or the side stand on the bike.
A wee bit of encouragement for this last little bit.
So here we go. Wobbling around. Pick it up. Feet up. and back onto the ground.
Well done, Andy. Back onto the ground again.
Thank you very much. So, what we're going to do is back up on again, over to the top, and back off the far side, I think. This is the second gear. Here we go. You see the whole lot moving? Not overly steady. The ground's a bit uneven. Just to add to the fun. So now we're going to pick it up on, wheelie off the far side, and hopefully all in one piece onto the ground.
Well done, we round of applause there, both of them, right?
So now we've lined it up. We've got the yellow box, the red box, and back onto the ground again. Try and get it right up over the top here. Still in second gear. And let's see what happens. Once again, you see it all wobbling around. It's not just my belly. It is the bike and the equipment. Now, as you can see, the bike's slightly off centre, which makes it a wee bit more awkward. What we want to do is bring the back wheel just over about a tyre's width. Feels a wee bit better. And now we're going to pick the front wheel right up in the mid-air and wheelie off the far side.
Well done, well done.
Whew. So, next up, got the A-frame. Called the A-frame for obvious reasons. Got the shape of an A. And the whole way in here, you have to pick the front wheel right up into the air. And I don't need to say to you motorbike guys, if the bike stalls up here, it's mouth the nose and try and lift the stump. So let's see if we can keep the front wheel right up in the mid-air and the bike moving forward. Once again, make sure this doesn't move too much. Yeah, it does. Moves a little bit. There we go. Right up and over the top again. No. What about this one? Yeah, it's pretty steady. So let's try it. Once again, line it up. And the whole way in here, try and not hit the bash plate too hard on the undercut side. And then once again, front wheel right up into the mid-air and wheelie off the far side. Straight back off the far end, just like so. So we're getting on, not too bad here. I think the only thing left with us is the staircase at the far side, way up. Right up onto the top. Thank you very much. And back off the far side. Whew. I think we've worked it all around most of the equipment. Thank you very much. Just one final piece. We're going to take it up from the back of the van. Once again from the back of the van here. And onto this piece of equipment. And finish it back onto the ground. Here we go.
Well, there you have it. That's basically our last and final video upload of 2024, and I do hope you've enjoyed everything that Classic Dirt Bike has brought you this year. I think this current video takes the total to about 85 video uploads for 2024, so as you can gather, it's been quite a busy year for my channel. But again, a big thank you to all the subscribers who have signed up during 2024. It's nice to know that the stuff that we're putting on for you to take a look at is very much appreciated. But of course, we will be back in 2025 with a brand new series of Classic Dirt Bike TV, and we've got some nice bikes lined up for you to take a look at the start of 2025. And we'll also have a regular annual visit to the Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show, which will be coming up in early February next year. But again, it all just remains for me to say thanks to everybody out there for taking the time to watch my videos. So have a fantastic new year, and we'll see you all again in 2025.